Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Um, so as Vishal was kind enough to say, my name is Jason Johnson, and I am one of two channel partner managers here at Route For Me. So at Route For Me, my role is to help our partners and to help their clients to leverage some of the technologies that we bring to the table at Route For Me. So what does that actually mean, and what does Route For Me actually do? So Route For Me as a company focuses on last mile logistics, and specifically we solve two different mathematical problems. We solve the traveling salesman problem, which is somebody who has to visit a bunch of different locations on any given day and wants to do that in the most efficient order possible. And then we also solve the fleet problem. So I have 5 vehicles making 15 stops a day, visiting 15 clients, and how do I do that most efficiently? So that's the actual area we focus on. Route For Me has been around for over 10 years. We're a global organization. We serve 36,000 customers globally. We have our app has actually been downloaded over 3 million times, and there's currently 4 million users in our ecosystem right now. That number actually changes so quickly that 4 million is the official number that marketing said I can use, but the number is actually probably significantly higher. So my background, I'm actually originally from the Caribbean, and it's one of the things that I am super happy to partner with a great organization and team like the team at Optimus. And it's one of the things that I actually really enjoy, which is helping bring these types of technologies to the region. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share my screen, and we're going to kind of take a deep dive into what our software does in some ways, but only a specific sub portion of it, as it focuses on how businesses, large and small, can leverage strategic planning to help them get their arms around the rising gas prices that everybody is dealing with today. So my screen should appear in a minute, and everybody should be able to see it. Awesome. So on the grand assumption that my screen is now appearing, one of the things I wanted to start with is I wanted to start by taking a look at kind of what's happened with the price of gas, right? If we look at the price of gas over the last year, the number has crept up over time increasingly, and I'm sure I don't have to tell you guys this, but it's a significant problem, right? It's affecting businesses, it's affecting consumers. The reality is expenses are climbing, and businesses have to deal with this. So one of the things that we bring to the table at Route For Me is the ability to help businesses do strategic planning. And strategic planning is such a powerful part of any business's success strategy. So there is a famous sales trainer. His name was Zig Ziglar. And one of his famous quotes was, "Failing to plan is planning to fail." And one of the things that people tend to struggle with is, and questions I tend to get asked is, but Jason, how can I understand, or how can I plan for, like deliveries that maybe haven't happened yet? Or how do I understand how much it costs me to drive my routes? Or the fact that I'm actually looking at my GPS and telematics information. So I'm tracking my vehicles. I know where they are. I actually know what the route cost me, but by the time I figure out how much it's cost me, it's too late. And that's kind of where we can fit into the equation and help businesses take a different look at how they do stuff. So what you're essentially looking at here is an address book view of our software. I'm located in Jacksonville, Florida, which is why this is a view you have here. In this particular view, all the blue are clients that are loaded in my address book. All the green are warehouses I created. This is all test data, so that you could get a feel for what an organization that serves multiple clients and has multiple locations could be looking at in terms of its planning and in terms of figuring out its routes. So there are multiple ways that somebody can plan their routes. And I've seen everything from people who use Post-it notes and stick it on a whiteboard, down to people who literally print out manifests for every order on a load and then try and organize those into a stack. The stack is then given to the driver. The driver then has to load the truck and then kind of figure out in what order he's going to deliver everything. And that's entirely left up to him. So in those particular scenarios, there's significant amounts of human time and human capital spent on kind of getting that done. And those types of problems are what we solve at Route for Me and in our system. So when it comes to being able to do strategic planning and look at stuff, the really neat thing is that you don't actually have to drive a route in order to figure out how much a route's going to cost you. So you actually have the ability to, for example, look at a territory. And in our system, you have the ability to draw territories. These are my hand-drawn territories. And as you can see, I barely squeaked through art in kindergarten, but for this particular application, it works. And in any given territory, you could do stuff as simple as right-click on it, and then you could actually plan a route within a territory if you wanted to. So one of the things that is important in our system because of changing gas prices is your ability as a user to enter the local gas prices where you are. I know a lot of people look at this stuff and they're like, well, you know, you're in America and you're getting American gas prices. The neat thing is it doesn't matter. You get to enter your own gas prices and configure it so that you're seeing the view that you want to see. So if I was going to, for example, take a look and see, hey, what does it look like if I'm going to run deliveries out to my northern territory, and like, how much would that cost me? I could do something as simple as right click on the territory and I could say plan route with territory. It's going to ask me where I like to name the route, and we're going to name the route today and now, and then I get to pick a starting location, right? And in this case, I can do a couple of things. I can actually look up my warehouse. I'm planning for the Northern Territory, so I pick my Northern warehouse. I can then set my driver schedule. One of the neat things is we do look at historical traffic patterns if the data is available. And one of the places we actually get information from is Google's services and servers as it relates to their Google mapping information, which actually has historical traffic data from literally all around the world, countries big and small, because it's reported by users who use Google. And if you think about it, everybody who has an Android smartphone and uses any type of maps or mapping technology or any kind of like simple GPS to find an address will be contributing to that global pool of data. You also have the ability to be strategic in how you set your stuff up. So if you have people making deliveries, for example, food delivery specifically, you can set your expected time on site. So in our world, we refer to it as service time. So if it was, let's say, for example, pizza that needed to be delivered, you know, what's the average time somebody would spend on site? Probably somewhere between 1 minute and 2 minutes. They don't need a lot of time. It will, of course, depend on if they have to park far away and walk or something like that. But on average, it really doesn't take super long to park up next to somebody's house, hop out, ring a doorbell, knock on a door, and then deliver a pizza, collect payment, and then leave. So you have the ability to set those service times. If you're not in the food delivery business, or if you're in a different type of business, the beautiful thing is you can actually schedule that out to whatever you need in terms of a time block. From there, I'll talk about the different types of optimizations we do. And this is where the efficiency really comes in and the planning comes in, because you have the ability to do several things. In our system, you actually have the ability to not optimize if you want to, and simply create the routes in whichever order you wanted to create them. So in this particular scenario, I'm not going to optimize them. I'm just going to tell my system it's going to be a round trip. I'm starting my schedule at 7 a.m. I'm going to give myself a service time of 10 minutes per stop. And essentially, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and tell it to create a route. So what the system's going to do in this scenario is pull all 42 addresses. It's going to take a look at them. I'm going to say, yeah, this is what I need. This is what I want. And I'm simply going to say finish the import. The system is going to take those addresses and create for me essentially a route. And when it creates that route, one of the neat things it's going to do is it's actually going to pull in the information, and based on travel times, time waiting, and all the rest of that, it's actually going to show me what it's going to cost if I was to drive this route. And here we go. So based on the information I gave it, right, there's a total of 41 stops in my Northern Territory. It would cost me $135.36 based on current fuel prices. And it's given me an estimated distance of 676.78 miles. And it will take me a total of nearly 7 hours in service time to complete all this. So that was just a very simple here. These are the stops. This is the order in which I want to do it. And the system did not add any intelligence to this for me. So if we capture this cost, for example, of $135.36 and the mileage and all the rest of it, we actually have some things we can do in terms of potential improvements. So what we didn't do was we didn't optimize it, right? So in this particular scenario, I can change to a simpler optimization and say, hey, I have one driver and I want you to put these stops in the most logical order based on the information that you have. So I'm not changing the service time. I'm just going to ask the system to make some decisions for me. And I update the route settings, and it's going to shift things around for me. And in this particular scenario, right, as it's still one driver, right, nothing's really changed significantly as far as like what the cost and all that's going to be. It's just juggled around a couple of the stops and put them in a slightly more efficient manner. But overall, it didn't have a huge effect on what we're doing. So now comes what the software can do for you based on like, several different scenarios. So if I go back to the address book where I was before, and we know what that looks like if I had to drive it with one truck, using those same time constraints, I can actually do a couple other things, right? So I can plan a route with the territory. I'm going to leave the name the same. Pick my northern warehouse. Leave my schedule exactly the same. I will set my service time to be the same, but I'm going to change how I optimize. What I'm going to do is I actually have, for example, more than one driver that can do this, and I can start adding constraints or business rules to this. So I can start understanding how my business needs to do business and make decisions based on that. So if I have, for example, 3 vehicles, right, and my drivers have a total of 8 hours to get all the work done, I can also set, for example, capacity constraints, revenue constraints, maximum stops, all that kind of fun stuff. Those are all opportunities in which I can do it. And then, for example, I can also determine how I want to run it, but we're going to make these all round trip. We can also account for a variable which is known as time windows. Time windows is where, for example, and in the food and beverage industry, this is pretty common, where you're given a restriction within which somebody can arrive. So, for example, restaurants will typically resupply outside of their normal working hours if they don't have access in the back or somewhere where a delivery vehicle can be inconspicuous. So they would have to have the service show up ahead of time, unload, get everything stocked into the kitchen and everything else, and then have the driver and the vehicle out of there so that it doesn't disrupt their client flow. So in this scenario, time windows is actually something we can solve for. So I'm going to go ahead and create the route with those parameters, and the system's kind of going to do the same thing. So it pulls in the 42 addresses that we have. If an address flagged as being not correct, you actually have the ability to edit it right on the map. So you could, for example, go in and take a look at something that doesn't work right. I didn't manipulate them on the last go round, so I won't manipulate them here. And then I can just simply say finish import. The system is then going to take a look at all those parameters or rules that needed to be applied. And then it's going to go ahead and look at the fact that I have multiple vehicles and the other time constraints or whatever else I added to it. And it's going to go ahead and create the routes for me. Once those routes are created, I then have the ability to assign them to drivers, assign them to vehicles, anything along those lines in terms of increased efficiency. So in the example of assigning it to a driver, it would even be something where as long as they have a smartphone, iOS or Android, our app can be downloaded, the route can be assigned, and they never even have to check in at the office. So here's a classic example of the differences between leveraging the automation of what our system can do. So the first notable difference was I told it I had 3 vehicles available and the system was actually able to do it in 2. So that part actually made a big difference. The next scenario that's also important is because of the 2 vehicles, we were able to drop the estimated distance simply using 2 vehicles to 141 miles instead of the 667 total miles that it had in terms of all the driving around you had to do to make those stops by yourself. That's a significant difference, right? And then it also drops the fuel cost significantly because we're driving significantly less distances. And as I'm sure you can appreciate, you're probably scratching your head and wondering, well, how is that even possible? How can I take two vehicles and drive a total of 141 miles, whereas in one vehicle, I have to drive 676? Well, the major difference is the fact that I didn't really apply any significant intelligence to this. I just said, go do it, right? So it shows you what the inefficiencies can be. And some of those inefficiencies can be developed over time. The service time didn't change. The travel times didn't change. But the difference is we're splitting the workload and increasing efficiency dramatically. So at this point, if there's any questions, feel free to send them along. You can pop them in the QA chat. And if they're here, I'll take a look and try and answer them. But now's a good time. I'll pause for a minute. So if there are any questions, you can get those in. Well, fantastic. No questions, I guess. At this point in time, feel free to send them in at any point in time. If we don't get the questions here now and you send them in later, we'll actually send out the answers to it. So in this particular scenario, you can see what an impact, for example, the software would have in terms of making strategic decisions. Do I buy another truck? Is that something that my business can afford? And in quite a few instances, when you can take a look at stuff without actually having to do it first, sometimes the question changes from, can I afford to do it to can I afford to not do it? And that can be significant for small businesses. You also have the ability to do strategic planning. So if we go back to my original view that I was looking at in terms of the address book map and my distribution of customers, I can make other choices too. So as it loads, I'll explain. So right now, I only have a warehouse in the north, a warehouse that I have that's like downtown, and then I have a warehouse in the Southern Territory. I don't have one actually on my eastern side, and I don't have one on my western side. So in these scenarios and having this information, I could, for example, go and look at commercial properties, punch in the address without actually having to purchase or commit to it, and then plan some theoretical routes to service these areas or territories and see what the efficiencies look like before I have to commit to a large real estate transaction or anything along those lines. The other advantage you have at looking at your information this way is the ability to parse it or filter it. So for example, if the information existed in our system and you wanted to look at customers by revenue, and I wanted to see customers that have a revenue value that is greater than or equal to 157, for example, I can add that in and I can now start taking a look at what that looks like on the screen, and I can visualize it, like where are those customers? So if that number mattered to me, I can also look at where the highest concentrations of those customers are broken down by territory. And in this particular scenario, I have the most located on the west side. And if I change the value to something else, I'll just go like 189 as another random value. Does the number still hold? Yep, still got more of those on the west side, right? And then I can kind of keep going depending on what I want to do. So I can look at these and, 202, too high. There are no customers that break the 202 number. So it's different ways that you can essentially look at how you're solving your problems geographically by applying a technology that is able to solve these challenges for you. Several years ago, when GPS and asset tracking first made its appearance, it was a scenario where someone actually had to sit down and explain to people in great detail from a value proposition perspective that hey, if you know where your drivers are and you know what your drivers are doing, it can save you money, right? It's the equivalent of 1 cup of coffee a day. That was a classic line. The cost of 1 cup of coffee a day to save a significant amount of money. And that money savings translated into reducing idle time. 1 hour of idle time equals a gallon of gasoline. So if you look at the national average of what gasoline prices are today, and it's showing at like 3.11 as the current gasoline price, right? If you think about that, that's $3.11 an hour spent if a vehicle is left idling, right? So those are some of the things to think about from just a simple GPS tracking perspective. So now, fast forward 10 years after it's no longer required to explain to anybody what GPS and asset tracking does. The question there is like, do I have it, right? And if I don't, like, why not? Route optimization is kind of entering that space now, where people are taking a look, they're asking the hard questions. Am I doing this as efficiently as possible? Could I do it better? Are there ways to reduce my planning time? Are there ways to reduce my loading times? All that kind of stuff by being able to plan in advance. Okay, so Esther has a question. It says, in your delivery planning, do you start closest to the warehouse, or do you go to the most far delivery and work your way backwards to the warehouse? Is there an assistant with the driver to make the workload lighter? So in this particular scenario, we do not account for crew on the trucks. So depending on what you were delivering, for example, you could have someone in there or not. Like, that's entirely up to how you decide to run your business. As far as how the system determines whether it starts closest or farthest, it really comes down to the rules you put in place or the rules that your business requires in order to serve your customers. So we're a very horizontal solution. Typically, in most cases, our system will prioritize distance, because distance is something that if we reduce distance, we reduce gas consumption. So I hope that answers your question. So at this point, if my math is right, I'm running right around my presentation time. And hopefully this was informative, and I've answered some of the questions maybe some of you had about this and how this could affect you operationally. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to the team at Optimus. They'd be more than happy to assist you with this. They can always connect you with me if it was something you'd be interested in learning more about. If it's something you'd be interested in taking a deeper look at, they'd be more than happy to make those arrangements for you. And we would actually do a one-on-one session. We would talk about your business, talk about the challenges you're facing, and see if, for example, this software would be a fit for you, and B, what some of those solutions could potentially look like. So I hope everybody found this a good investment of their time. And again, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to pass them along. And with that, I will turn it back over to the crew at Optimus.